What's going on, internet? IG here again today, and today I'm going to be reviewing the flagship from Sony this year, the Sony Xperia Z. So the Sony Xperia Z was announced and sort of demoed at CES at the beginning of the year, and it was a pretty cool concept in that it had a 1080p display, waterproof, dustproof, and a all very nice 5-inch display design, etc., with all glass and black and shiny, etc. So while it does have a great list of features, it also has a few caveats that I'm going to be going over today. So this has been my experience with the 3 weeks now that I've had with this device, and it is going to be my new daily driver because it really met a nice cross-section of both price and feature set for the price. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so here is the Sony Xperia Z, or Z, depending which hemisphere you're from, and it's basically an all-glass slab. So it's got a glass on the back and glass on the front. Now it's Gorilla Glass 2 on the back, which means that it's relatively durable, although there have been some reports of it being kind of delicate at the same time. Either way, I don't really want to drop this device all too much in a hurry. That's also why I got a case for it as well. And then on the front you have just reinforced glass. It doesn't really state which it is, but really the front and center of this device is of course the display. It's probably one of the cheaper 1080p display phones you can get out there nowadays, and because of the fact it is such a huge display and it's pumping 1920 by 1080 resolution, the battery life can take a bit of a hit if you have the screen on all the time, which is why I have a fairly aggressive screen turn off policy, because I just can't afford to have that screen on all the time. With a 2330 milliamp battery, it doesn't last as long as I would have liked in its default settings. However, there are some settings that you can enable to kind of combat that, and it does a pretty good job of sustaining battery life with those settings enabled. Having said all that, the display, like I said, is front and center, and I literally mean front and center because you knock it off slightly off center and you'll notice that the colors instantly go out of wash, and you lose a lot of the contrast, you lose a lot of the color reproduction as soon as you go a few degrees off angle. I already knew going into purchasing this device that the display was the way it is, but front on the display looks fantastic. It's very bright, it's very vibrant. Also the Sony Bravia 2 engine that they used, or at least they tout, that powers a lot of the photos and videos. They say it helps with color reproduction, making it a bit more saturated and vibrant, etc. But to be honest, I mean, while there is a bit more saturation that's gained when you do turn these settings on, I found it to be a little bit too much, and so I ended up turning it off. But it is there if you want it, and apparently they say that it comes from their long experience with televisions, which may or may not be true. Now, this Android device, even though it is a flagship of 2013, it is rocking a slightly older version of Android with 4.1.2. There is rumors of a 4.2 update in the works, but by that time we already would have seen 4.3 come out, so it's really a moot point. However, what I will say is that the skin that they have put on Android on the Sony Xperia Z is actually very minimalist and very unobtrusive compared to the original vanilla Android skin. So you can see here that the menu and home screen looks very similar. Again, you've got on-screen buttons here instead of the actual physical capacitive buttons. So all of the controls and stuff are very similar to what you would find on a Nexus device, lending itself to that, to the possibility of having a Google edition of the Sony Xperia Z in the future. You do get a lot of Sony apps pre-installed as well, such as the Movies app, Walkman, and their own proprietary album, which I've got to say, I mean, they're not horrible, but I'm not a huge fan of them either. So I've downloaded the Camera Jelly Bean Plus and the Gallery Jelly Bean Plus because they seem to give me a better experience. So I'll definitely say for the price point, the screen is worth it, but do be aware of those viewing angles, so it's not the best device to be showing a whole bunch of people. The argument that the guy in the phone shop made was that, well, who else is going to be looking at your phone at the end of the day? And it's kind of true. But then if you are just sitting your phone somewhere and you're wanting to just watch it and keep an eye on it, then it can get a little bit annoying with those viewing angles. Now, one of the biggest features touted about this Sony device is the fact that it is waterproof and dustproof, so you can actually splash a whole jug of water on it or drop it in the swimming pool or something and it'll be fine, owing to all of these caps that cover all the ports around the device, both headphone, USB, micro SD, and the micro SIM card tray. So I get the feeling that that's where the poor viewing angles on the display comes from is that waterproof coating. I'm not entirely sure, but even things like the speaker grill, the microphone, and the small speaker on the side here are waterproof as well. So it can sit up to 1.5 meters underwater for up to 30 minutes, which is not too bad if you're particularly clumsy with your phone. So it's definitely one of the features that I've appreciated about this phone. It's certainly one of the most expensive shower radios you can come across, but hey, it's a convenience and it's a feature, so you may as well take advantage of it. The next major feature that I need to talk about is the camera, because it is one of the main reasons that I bought this phone as opposed to a lot of the other devices out there around the same price point. It is a 13 megapixel sensor, and while many of the flagship phones of today are rocking a 13 megapixel sensor, it also has this XMOR sensor thing that it touts. Now, it brings a lot of experience. Again, Sony brings a lot of its experience from the world of its other electronic endeavors, like the TV, like we mentioned before, and the camera as well, from a lot of its CyberShot range. And I've got to say, I've been pretty impressed with the camera. It's not the most fantastic camera, and it's not the ultimate replacement to a compact, but I definitely found myself reaching for this a lot quicker than I did my main SLR when I was taking a trip. Because the quality of shots that you do get is very, very impressive. The color reproduction is pretty good, and especially when you turn off the Bravia engine, the color reproduction becomes a lot more realistic. And then viewing these photos on a bigger screen, as well as the screen that's on the phone, leads to very, very sharp color reproduction, especially in good lighting. In low lighting, it's not too bad. The photos get a bit noisy pretty quick, but to be honest, with that many pixels, you're not really going to notice it, at least in web sharing. Sony also touts its HDR mode, which is basically the one underexposed, one overexposed shot, blending them together, not only with photos, but also with videos. So I managed to try that out, and it does come up with some pretty good results, especially in mixed lighting with a lot of backlight. And I've got to say I was pretty impressed with the results, but the video is a little bit more sketchy. It kind of leads to a little bit of ghosting with the footage. I'm not really sure how to explain it, but it didn't look entirely realistic. But for what it's worth, the HDR mode is there, and it's very usable on the photo side, and it kind of works on the video side of things. Now, as far as connectivity goes, this phone is very, very good. As far as reception and everything that a phone is usually responsible for, it's been very nice. It's been able to pick up reception in a lot of places where I wasn't able to get reception before, which is a great thing, and of course that always depends on your network carrier. But at the same time, it's great to have a phone that actually works decently as a phone. Call quality has been very clear indeed, and also I've been dropping a lot less calls than I was on the previous Galaxy S2 that I had. It's also worth mentioning that it does have 4G LTE, the 3G over many different bands. I believe it's quad band HSDPA+. So it really has all the bells and whistles when it comes to connectivity, and that was another reason that I bought this phone over a few of the others. So ultimately, this Sony device is definitely a fresh foray for Sony into the smartphone arena. They've been finding it hard to come up with a competitor to all of the major flagships being put out by HTC and Samsung, but I really feel like the Xperia Z has stepped it up to a whole new level. The fact that it is waterproof and the fact that it has a decent camera, great screen, and very good connectivity, I think were the main reasons that I bought this phone. Of course, there are trade-offs. Like I mentioned, that screen viewing angles are very poor. The battery life is mediocre if you don't have the stamina mode settings enabled. Basically, the stamina mode is just so that you can, it cuts off all connectivity except for mainly calls and SMSs when the screen is turned off. So it's very useful. Obviously, you won't get notifications on Facebook, Twitter, or Gmail, or any app that uses internet, but at the same time, you're going to conserve quite a bit of battery life. And I've managed to get a solid 1 3/4 days out of the battery when I enable the stamina mode. Without it, I'd barely make it through a full 12-hour day. It is rocking the same internals as a phone such as the Nexus 4 with 2 gigs of RAM and the Snapdragon S4 Pro chip, quad-core I believe. So it's definitely going to be fast enough and matching it with a lot of the other smartphones out there. If it came to actually crushing benchmarks, then I believe the HTC One and the Galaxy S4 would both have the upper edge on this. But at the end of the day, in real world use, you're not really going to notice much performance differences there. There is a little bit of lag in the user interface every now and again, but it's certainly nothing that I've been shaking my fist at. So let me know what you think about Sony's flagship in the comments section below. Of course, this phone is only going to come down in price as time goes on, and I definitely think give it about 6 months and this phone will be a steal. As for right now, it's still very good value for money for the features that it offers, and as long as you're aware of its weaknesses, then I think it's a very decent buy. Let me know in the comments below what you think, and of course feel free to follow me on Facebook or Twitter or Google+. Again, links in the description. And I'll also be interested to see if this comes out as a Google edition in the addition to the Galaxy S4, the HTC One, and the Nexus 4 in Google's Play Store. Hopefully we'll have a review of the Galaxy S4 coming soon, so it'll be an interesting comparison of these two flagships. And you'll also need to stay tuned for a Crunchbang review coming very soon. Thank you to all of your suggestions in the comments of the Debian review. Like this video if it helped you out, and subscribe if you like this content on a regular basis, and I shall see you all in the very near future. Peace out, ladies and gentlemen.